Okay, and as you may have just heard, we are recording this presentation, so we'll make that available to folks. Chris, I'm just going to run through all the slides myself, and then, of course, as questions come up that you're able to answer, feel free to chime in. Okay, so thank you guys. We're here today to discuss the expanded hours residential pilot collection program. And if we go to the next slide, I will try and introduce the key players on the city side and jump in. So I'm Mike Carroll, the Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure and Sustainability. I'm joined by Chris Pahalski, the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives, also noticed. Certainly want to mention Commissioner Carlton Williams with the Streets Department, who's been involved in us working through this, as well as Deputy Streets Commissioner for Sanitation, Keith Warren. So we're here today to talk about what we're calling the early collections pilot, which is essentially to give the Streets Commissioner the authority to adjust the start times in Center City and give you guys some of the justifications and also some background in terms of what's been going on and what we see going on moving forward. And just to kind of give a little bit of the big picture here, the reasons for us taking on this collections pilot have to do with our Connect plan and some objectives that we have in the Connect plan, but also our experience over the last year or so around a couple issues dealing with both on-time collections and our worker safety related both to traffic conditions and, as we experienced this summer, impacts of extreme heat. So our Connect plan is the document which sort of lays out for the city our goals in the area of transportation. And one of the key goals is for us to be an efficient government and to provide a reliable and efficient transportation system, but also to be reliable and efficient in all the services that we provide. And we feel like this effort goes right in that category. We feel like it's an effort to address the work involved in the operations and make it as reliable and efficient as possible given the constraints that we have. So as we look at the existing condition, what I want folks to be aware of is that due to some conditions that took place coming out of the pandemic, and especially during the summer months, the commissioner found that we were able to address both the operational requirements of taking up all the loads in Center City and South Philadelphia, and we were able to address specific conditions specifically related to the heat emergencies by starting the collections in Center City as early as 6 a.m. And so this has been going on for the last 12 months or so, and we've been kind of keeping an eye on things, but we wanted to establish a formal pilot in order for us to set forth some criteria, both evaluation criteria and some parameters around what should and could happen on any given day. And so that pilot framework really stands in contrast to the established what's on the books for residential trash collection, which is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Daily, and there being some fluctuation for what happens in the warm weather months, the summertime, versus what happens during the rest of the year. But for our purposes, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is the window, which is like I said, on the books. So what we understand is that as we're starting later, 7 a.m. or later, there's a few impacts that we've seen and known about over the years. Folks who drive around or ride a bike or catch a bus in Center City have probably had the experience of being stuck behind a collection vehicle. And, that's not great for the traveling public because it really slows things down and reduces people's ability to get where they need to on time. But it's also not great for the sanitation collections either, because it's a much slower operation when we're running compactors through during the morning rush, and also creates these safety issues that we've talked about or will talk about. And as a result of that, we also see that there's impacts in terms of the amount of idling, air quality that we're concerned about from a climate and public health perspective. We think that this is also a period where there's going to be more adverse interactions or conflicts between these heavy vehicles navigating, negotiating the grid downtown, and people who are walking around and people riding a bike and, you know, waiting for the bus and so forth. And these are things we want to minimize as well from a Vision Zero perspective. And, you know, some of the issues dealing with workers are when there's more traffic and people are in a bigger hurry, that's not great for folks who are kind of ducking in and out behind the vehicles. We try and minimize that as much as we can. We certainly want to make sure that the crews are operating as safely as they can, but having this extra margin to get them through the most congested areas, the busiest areas before the morning rush is really setting in is something that really does make a difference for their personal safety. Next slide. So our proposal here is to begin a 6-month pilot. It would start next week and essentially would expand the collection hours so that the commissioner has the authority, and he may not always exercise this authority, but has the authority to start as early as 5:30 a.m. for the area of the city that's bounded by Vine Street to the north, Bainbridge to the south, Delaware River to the east, and Schuylkill River to the west. And this tends to be the most congested area of the city. It also, to speak to one of the other reasons, is probably where the heat island effect is greatest in the city. And in particular, what we found during the hot summer months and when we had heat emergencies, in order to keep our workers safe, we had to adjust that start time earlier to get them kind of through this part of the city and also kind of wrapped up overall before, you know, it created a real impact for folks' health and a bad effect in our operations in terms of us having to leave loads behind, you know, pick them up the next day and so forth in the middle of the heat. So in practice, we've generally been starting around 6 a.m. and this has been going on, and we think that that practice generally will be how we stick with things. And it's just a matter of giving that extra little bit of flexibility so that we can kind of see how it might work. If for a period of time we start at 5:30 and, you know, take notes and do some evaluation on that. But also if we know we're in the middle of or going into a heat emergency, it gives the commissioner directly the authority to really address that head on until that emergency is passed. Go to the next slide. Okay, to summarize the goals, we're looking to increase the or decrease the number of conflicts we see between the vehicles, compactors that are out there that we're putting out on the street, and pedestrians, cyclists, transit, and folks who are driving around to work, to school, to their appointments. So that's a safety issue, but it's also going to help us improve congestion, not just for our own vehicles and our own operation, but certainly for the traveling public in general. We think this really addresses the three main things in terms of safety, air quality, and government efficiency, and we will be trying to measure based on those effects. Specifically trying to understand how the route times are improved if we adjust one way or another from what we're doing right now. But also the travel times for the traveling public is something we're interested in to see if there's measurable differences we can identify. We will be tracking any issues that come to us in terms of complaints. You know, having had some experience over the past year starting at 6 a.m., we have not seen any significant changes or differences one way or another in terms of complaints. And so, you know, I should reiterate, this is for the municipal fleet. It is not a pilot that's going to address the commercial operators that serve many restaurants. But for our municipal fleet, we'll be interested to see if there's any specific complaints that come forward related to any possible changes. And again, to talk about the time frame, you know, we're talking to you now, which is kind of the heart of our September time frame. We had to make a couple adjustments, but we're still hoping to get this thing launched in September next week. And, you know, so far haven't seen any major issues with that. We'll be doing the best we can to not just have these types of meetings, to make sure that we've got a pretty strong website presence, both on the Otis website and the Streets website on phila.gov, and pushing messages out on social media. In October, as we get things off the ground and running, we'll be sending out, of course, sweeps education officers just to make sure folks understand what they need to do. The purpose of that is not to penalize people, but really just to make sure we're working with both businesses that do use municipal collections and certainly residents to understand, what's going on as best as possible and any adjustments that need to be made. And then in the heart of the pilot, it's going to go to February of next year. And so we'll be compiling evidence, seeing how things work, tracking any complaints, other issues that come up, and trying to prepare some documentation so that by March, when we plan on ending the pilot, we can present the findings both to City Council and to the public at large and really start to think about what the next steps are. So just want to make clear, if this pilot is working well and we're not seeing a lot of complaints and we feel like we are able to address the goals of the pilot, there is some chance that, as we get into March, we will try and start some of the conversations specifically with City Council to extend this condition, this authority indefinitely. That does not mean that given that authority, we will just consistently have those start times, but we do need some consistency in order to plan shifts and make sure the public is ready. But if this is an astounding success, there is some prospect that we just kind of roll into it as the new normal and then continue from that point forward, taking in feedback as we go. But the plan right now is to wrap it up in March, take stock of the situation, and then come back and figure out what makes sense moving through April of 2023 from that point forward. So that concludes our presentation. Certainly thank you guys for joining us. We're available to address questions in the Q&A. Feel free to add those. You can certainly send in comments or encourage your friends, your neighbors to send in comments. And I might ask Keisha maybe to break in with the appropriate address for the streets department. And then we can also include in the Q&A our Otis address as well.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We do have 2 questions. Will there be any training to drivers of compactors to move over when cars build up behind vehicles?
Yes, so this is something, it's part of the operation for them to be along the curb as much as possible. I don't see any specific changes, but if there are some concerns in the way that the drivers operate, we can certainly figure out whether we do need to address that through training. But I will say this, one of the benefits of this pilot is there'll be less of that because like I've said, the goal is to get the compactors out of these neighborhoods when there's really any likelihood that cars would be backing up behind them at all. So if this pilot's successful, of course, we'll do our best to train the drivers, make sure that their skills are up to snuff. But that issue in general should be much less significant if this pilot is successful. I might invite Deputy Warren to contribute any thoughts he has based on what I'm saying. You're on mute, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner. Or Troy Cooper also might contribute thoughts on that one if you have any thoughts. Troy? Maybe having some audio issues.
Deputy Warren or Troy, are you unable to unmute?
I saw Chief Cooper come off. In any case, I think the point I'm trying to make is the main issue is that we understand that there are congestion issues that occur that the public is impacted by, and that really is one of the goals of this pilot is to minimize that. We'll certainly take on any training opportunities that we can think through, based on that feedback. Why don't we move on to the next question?
Hello, can you hear me, Mike?
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in answer to that question, which is, it is already our standard policy to let traffic pass wherever we can. So that just depends on the logistics of the block. If there's enough room is there, we operate under a time constraint too. We have a certain amount of time to finish collecting routes. And if we, in the center city where traffic is constant, so it may not be able to pull over after every car, but this early collection should alleviate a lot of that. But just for general knowledge, that is already our practice. Where we can pull over at the corner or where there's room to pull over and let traffic pass, we do it already.
Thank you, Deputy Warner. So Keisha, you want to go on to the next one?
Yes. The next question. It is my understanding that some of the private collection companies do pick up early in the morning to avoid the pedestrians, cyclists, etc., and receive violations from the city. Will that be suspended during this pilot program?
No, that will not be suspended. And yeah, your observation, we think, is correct. What we learned from this pilot may inform future policy with respect to private collections. There are some stakeholders who are interested in that, not just those businesses and not just those haulers, just for everyone's awareness, but also safety advocates have made the case that that is something that should be looked at. And I think in general, there's others who are concerned about the congestion effects and the safety effects of those private haulers, but it is not part of this pilot. That is not something that we're going to be relaxing either in terms of enforcement or even our communications on that issue.
The next question, for businesses that close at 5 p.m., will they be fined for putting their trash out early?
So the quick answer is no. What we will do is we're going to have the sweeps officers and the sanitation division do some outreach once we get this stood up and, get ready for it, to work with those businesses as much as possible to make sure that there aren't any negative impacts. We understand that we're trying something out and we're not trying to penalize anyone based on the way that their operations are run. So this is one of the things we're going to have to learn how to do in the most effective way and the most sensitive way possible. But our goal is not to have folks rack up a bunch of tickets because we're engaged in this pilot.
The next question, again, and as part of this evaluation, will you consider adding the private companies?
We're not going to consider that as part of this pilot, but like I said, when this pilot is complete and we have some evaluations, I do expect that discussion to get going. And there are a number of interested stakeholders. I know that there's been conversations within council about that issue. So that would likely take an ordinance in order for that to happen. So that ends up being something that could not just be at the streets commissioner's discretion. And this is really focused on giving the streets commissioner the authority to address the municipal fleet. So I do expect that conversation to keep going. I just want everyone to be aware of that, but that is not something we have the authority or could have the authority to add without council ordinance at this point in time.
The next question is, when will the press release be available? There will be a press release issued this week. We want to hold all the community meetings and let the residents know first, but we will be issuing a press release this week, and we will make sure residents definitely get that information from the press release. Following the next question, why would just an hour earlier or so make that much difference? When would collection in Center City likely be completed?
So I might ask Deputy Warren to weigh in, but just to be clear, we've already sort of come in an hour earlier on more of an ad hoc basis. And so what we're looking at is potentially, compared to pre-pandemic conditions, 90 minutes for what that's worth. But the thing I might ask Deputy Warren to really talk about is the amount of time that is spent on the portions of these routes in this pilot area and how that compares with the rest of the routes which are not in this area. So that 90-minute head start between Vine and Bainbridge, our sense is does have the benefit, does create some benefits. So Deputy Warren, would you mind coming off mute one more time and contributing some thoughts? And if we have technical difficulties. Oh, there we go.
Okay. So 90 minutes is a lot of time in the collections world, especially opposed to it's not so much the 90 minutes, it's when the 90 minutes is going to happen, which is before the general public or rush hour starts up. If we get in advance of rush hour, uh, it'll help us get in and get out faster. It's obviously easier to negotiate streets and collect trash when you're not interfered with by traffic as well. People trying to get by, people impatient behind the truck, and other businesses and services who are out in front of you, except the delivery trucks, Amazon. So all those things contribute. And at that time of the morning that we're looking at doing this pilot, we hope to avoid all of those pitfalls, thus making it easier to collect the street faster. In an ideal situation, we would be completely out of Center City by doing this between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, which is when most of the bulk of the traffic starts to congest in Center City. I mean, it starts to tick up around 6:30. Obviously, some early starters, but we're thinking if we can get out of there by 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, that will go a long way to us contributing to the delays in Center City.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warren.
The next question, must the time for putting out your trash be pushed back to 7 p.m.? I prefer to get my trash out before dark, particularly in inclement weather.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, our goal is to be flexible with people in terms of when that set out time is. It is supposed to be 7 p.m., but we're not trying to have anyone rack up a bunch of tickets during this pilot. So I think it'll be useful to get feedback from people to the extent that we can. We want to incorporate that feedback into the evaluation, so document it so that we understand what the best approach is moving forward. But in general, we will be looking to work with people to address that question. And, the goal is to make sure that there's not a lot of negative impacts from people setting it out earlier, understanding that the more the trash is out there, there is some risk that it contributes to some litter issues. But we're on a journey here to kind of figure out what's going to work best, given the other goals we have, keeping track of how things play out over the next 6 months and making adjustments accordingly.
The next question, what should businesses do that operate between 9 and 5 and can't abide by the hours listed in the pilot? No earlier than 7 p.m. and no later than 5:30 p.m.
Yeah, so that's the same response. And I will encourage people to be proactive in letting us know what their issues are. Again, we're going to be as understanding as we can with what those issues may be. And we'll probably need to understand a little bit what folks are currently doing, because like I've said, we've already sort of established this pattern, right? Where over the last 12 months, we have a little bit of experience with what people are doing. And so what's going to happen over the next 6 months is likely going to be predominantly the same as it's been over the last 12 months. And we'll just make sure that we're very communicative if and when we try and push it a half hour back. And, we're working with people as much as possible directly.
Mike, I think the questions, I think it's worth reiterating, this is for the residential pickup, not the commercial pickup. So I believe a lot of businesses are required to use commercial pickup, not the city's residential trash pickup, but maybe we could just have Deputy Warren or Chief Cooper confirm that.
So while they're coming off, I can confirm, yes, most businesses, large businesses, restaurants and so forth are going to be using haulers. There are some businesses, though, that we recognize do rely on municipal collections. And so that is a fact, and we will be working with those businesses to be accommodating during the course of this pilot.
Thank you, Mike. We did have two other questions, but one was about bike enforcement and the other one about trash. So we do ask, we have two areas where residents, if they would like to email general questions, otis@phila.gov, and you can also email philacan@phila.gov, PHILACAN if you have questions unrelated to this particular topic. We did also, Deputy Carroll, we do have one resident who stated, thank you for taking these steps to keep the Philadelphia community safe, especially being a Vision Zero city.
Thank you. And if there are some questions that feel like they're unrelated, we will try and respond, appropriately. I'm not sure there's a good way for us to get other answers back, but do want to focus today's conversation on the early collections pilot. So if folks want to maybe share contact information or something like that, Keisha, does that make sense?
Sure. If they would like to share their contact information, they can email us at otis@phila.gov and also at philacan@phila.gov. They can email their questions there as well as include their contact, and someone will definitely get back to them.
Okay.
And with that being said, I do not see any more questions. That is all we have in the Q&A.
Okay, Keisha, would you maybe remind us when the next opportunity is? I'm not sure if we have another town hall or not, but I just want to make sure we were clear about that.
This will be the final, today is the final town hall meeting. Next information will be through a press release, and then it will also be posted on phila.gov /streets, and at phila.gov /Otis. You can also find information that will be posted on social media with the handle @PhilaStreets and @Philly Otis, OTIS.
Okay, so thank you then for joining us today. If you are able to kind of spread the word amongst your neighbors and peers, that would be great. If folks have questions, just encourage them to send them into those email addresses Keisha shared, and we will do our best to answer all the questions we can in advance of the pilot, and of course during the pilot as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.